Morning, guys. I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School, back in another segment in our series, In the Shadow of Nessmuk. And what I want to talk about today is the tools. And I want to have a little discussion about this today because I want to explain my mentality as far as the tools go in this ultralight hunting, fishing, and camping kit, as well as where I think things are different now than they were for Nessmuk, and some of the things that I really don't agree with that Nessmuk did to begin with, even back then in his time, that I don't necessarily agree with or understand why he did them. But again, every woodsman has to do what works for them. So obviously what he did worked for him. There's no question about that. So for me to question that, is kind of like backseat driving. But at the same time, I want to discuss a couple things with you to think about when you are choosing kit items for any kit that you're building, for that matter, because we have a tendency, a lot of times today, I see lots and lots of posts all over the internet, even to this day, of, this is my Nessmuk trio, this is my Nessmuk kit, emulating very much what Nessmuk carried. So I want to discuss that in this series as well. So let's first start off by talking about the knife. Okay, that's a simple thing. Nessmuk's knife was a little over a 4-inch blade. It had an antler handle on it. It was about 3/32 to an 1/8 inch thick. It was probably not full tang. It was probably a stick tang knife. It doesn't describe it really well. It only shows a picture of it. So for our sake and purpose, I would say that something like, in my case for sure, the Mora Garberg is going to be my choice for that. It's going to be a full tang knife. It's very robust, and he talks about the robustness of that belt knife. So I know I can beat the snot out of this knife and I'm not going to hurt it. It's got a little over a 4-inch blade. It does have some belly on it, so it's good for skinning and things like that. And I'm able to baton this knife, which is going to become important here in a few minutes. Not that you should always baton your knife, because that's not what I'm saying. You should use tools for their proper application. At the same time, there are definitely times when batoning your knife is a prudent thing to do, whether it's room to swing an axe, whether it's a safety reason, whether it is you don't have an axe. There can be lots and lots of reasons to baton your knife. So to say that you should never baton your knife is ludicrous. But to say that you should always baton your knife is ludicrous on the other end of the scale. So you have to understand why and when you're batoning that knife. But I want it to be full tang in case I do decide to baton it, so I don't have to be as gentle with it as I would something that was a stick tang or a partial tang that may break under force, especially in colder weather. So the Mora Garberg would be my choice. And that's pretty simple, and it could be any knife of your choice, really, as far as that goes. I don't think there is one perfect knife. I've never believed that there's one perfect knife for every person. I think everybody has to make their own decisions on that. And what works for me may not work for you. What works for somebody else may not work for you. So you've got to figure out what's going to work best in your case. Now, let's talk for a minute real quick about the axe, okay? This is a big sticking point for me. Nessmuk's axe was a double bit axe, and this Moormaker axe that we saw on our website, double bit axe, is very reminiscent in size, weight, and shape to the axe that Nessmuk had made by Bushnell, I believe it was. Was it Bushnell or Bausch and Lomb? Might have been Bausch and Lomb. Anyway, the axe that he painstakingly had made to his specifications. I believe that the handle on this one is a little bit longer than Nessmuk's. I think his handle was probably about that long. And he chose a double bit axe because he just said in his book he believed from a boy that that was the way to go for woodcraft, and it had all kinds of merit. A double bit axe, in my mind, that's that small has very little merit, especially without other tools to back it up. So I think in Nessmuk's case, where he was only carrying 3 tools, one of them being that small double bit pocket hatchet, which probably weighed less than 2 pounds overall. The head was definitely less than 2 pounds. You don't really have enough inertia or enough weight forward on that thing for felling anything large, and that really wouldn't be your intent in a camp environment anyway. You're looking for something that can do limbing, popping out root balls, getting to things like fat wood on a pine, splitting wood if you need to for camp, busting up deadfall if you couldn't break it by snapping it into trees and things like that. The problem I see with the double bit in general is I understand the concept behind the double bit has always been one angle is different than the other. One is a steeper, one is more shallow. One is made for grubbing work or closer to the ground or things that might damage a finer edge. And then you keep a fine edge on one side to do your more delicate tasks, things that require a good sharp edge like limbing and things like that. Much less energy spent for the same result with a folding saw. And if this was, a 3 or 4 pound felling axe, it would be a different story. But for something this small, not much weight forward, and for the danger of swinging an axe compared to a saw, the weight differential of carrying a saw, I think, especially in the eastern woodlands of Ohio, unless it were the dead of winter when I was going to carry a larger axe anyway, if I were going to try to get away with something small and lightweight, it would be a folding saw over an axe. And that was good for Nessmuk because he did a lot of limbing when he talks about things like the Indian camp where he made it from hemlock fir and he would cut down a fir and then he would limb that fir. And I would say that if that fir was very big, it would have took him quite a while to cut that thing down with something like this. So I assume he probably stayed with something 4 inches or less, which is what I talk about anyway. You really don't need to cut anything larger than 4 inches in a temporary camp scenario. And that axe would definitely cut down a 4-inch tree. Is it the most efficient tool for that? Probably not, and we'll talk about that in a minute. However, the problem that I have with the double bit axe is that it removes the ability to, number one, have a wedge that you can baton that has a handle on it so that you can control that axe a little better as a splitting wedge and not have to swing that axe to split wood with it. Number two, it gives you no ability to be able to pound things like stakes. And I know that Nessmuk wasn't a big trapper, but you still may pound stakes around camp. And unless you're going to, again, cut something that you can use for a baton to bang those stakes within, it's very easy to use the backside of an axe to bang a wooden stake in the ground. So for me, if I were going to go from a double bit to something I would prefer in the 21st century, it would be a single bit pocket hatchet, more like something akin to a small SA Wetterlings or a small Council Tool Hudson Bay pocket axe or something like that. One of the Velvet Cut series that weighs, under 2 pounds and has a short handle on it. That would probably be my choice. However, it's not my choice. My choice is a folding saw. And I really sincerely in my heart believe that had Nessmuk had the choice of a folding saw, it would have been his choice as well. But he didn't have that choice. And that is the difference between then and now. We have things that they didn't have back then. He was using the most modern technological improvements in gear and equipment and fabrics and material that he could use in his time. They didn't have folding saws like this Silky Pocket Boy available at that time. They only had things like larger bucking saws that you would buy from the Sears Roebuck catalog that you would keep around the homestead for bucking firewood. And that wasn't conducive to carrying into the woods. So most woodsmen carried an axe instead of a saw. It wasn't until later on in the 20th century that folding saws, folding buck saws, and portable camp saws became more prevalent. And so you could say, well, how about a folding buck saw, like the Spring Creek folding buck saw, or something like the Bob Dusterud, or something like the Agawa Canyon, which are all great saws. No question about that. They will all cut lots and lots of trees. They'll do all the limbing you want to do. The problem is size and weight. What we're looking at in this series is emulating Nessmuk's mentality of the lightest weight kit I can afford that will get the job done. And for simple camp chores, things like cutting into pine to get the fat wood, things like, limbing, simple limbing tasks, things like just cutting off a stick to make a toggle or cutting steaks, all of those types of things, even to cutting halfway through a piece of wood to bang it on a rock or something to split it if I have to. I don't want to use my knife. A folding saw will do all of that just fine. This is a 70 millimeter pocket boy. This is not the smallest pocket boy. This is one size down from the Gom boy. This is a 70 millimeter pocket boy. And I find that this saw does just about everything I needed to do in the short term very, very well. So that would be my choice to replace any type of an axe. And in Nessmuk's case, replacing the double bit. So his trio of axe, saw, or axe, knife, and folding knife, in my mind, becomes full tang knife, saw, and the next thing we're going to talk about, which is an SAK. Okay, so Nessmuk's folding knife was a very simple double-bladed pocket knife. Not hard to find even nowadays, made from things like stainless steel from multiple companies out there. But I don't think that's the best bet in this day and age either. So what I chose, I'm gonna have to move some things out of my pack here to get to it. Got my ditty bag in the bottom of my outside pocket, which is where I need to get to things that are smalls that can get lost in multiple places or fill up my pockets with junk. I have it all in one pouch here. And I have in here my SAK. And I could carry this by itself in my pocket if I chose to do so, easy enough. Okay, so this is the model SAK that I chose to carry. It has one large blade here and one smaller blade here. So it is a double-bladed pocket knife that opens in reverse directions. However, this also has other tools on it that I deem essential for other purposes, okay? One of those tools that I think is a necessity is always going to be a small pocket saw of some type, okay? So a small pocket saw always comes in handy, all right? And I always want to make sure that my SAK has that saw. Now, as far as screwdrivers and things like that go, there's lots of things that you can do with these other than just use them for screwdrivers and can openers. There's modifications you can make to them that will make them more versatile for you. This model also happens to have a small pair of scissors, which I can use for hygiene, for trimming nails, and also for things like cutting line if I'm doing repairs. It has an awl built into it, and I think that is also an absolute necessity, that you have an awl for punching holes in things for repair, or for drilling holes or boring holes in wood. And so the main reason that I like SAKs, especially these models, not the non-ALOX models, because the ALOX models don't have this, is they have two things in them that I think are very, very important. They have a pair of tweezers, which I think is very important for first aid as well as management of things like ticks. And they also have a plastic toothpick. Now, looking through Nessmuk's writings, he wasn't big on hygiene. In fact, he didn't wash bug dope off for days on end to keep the glaze. He definitely had no fear of being dirty for a long time. I didn't see anything where it says, makes mention of him carrying a toothbrush and tooth powder, which would have been the norm at that time, anywhere in his writings. That doesn't mean that he didn't carry it. It just doesn't show up. But however, with this plastic toothpick, the reason I bring that up is because you see lots of things on the internet nowadays about you scrubbing your teeth with branches and plant stems and things like that. And, I don't need a toothpick. I can just cut, a sliver out of the woods. If you get that sliver stuck in your gums, or you break that stuff off up underneath a gum in your mouth, you are going to be the most miserable person on the planet until you can get to a dentist. Something like this plastic toothpick is never going to break off in your gums. So to me, that and the tweezers are a necessity. And that's the main reason I choose the SAK brand, is because it has those things on it. having a couple blades, having a pair of scissors, having a folding saw, having an awl, those are all very important to me as well, and make this a more well-rounded tool. And again, in Nessmuk's time, they did have some multi-tool type knives available, but they weren't very plentiful. And I think that he probably did not see it as a necessity. Whereas today, I look at things like these tweezers and this toothpick as a necessity. Again, they wouldn't have had folding saws, and I like to have an extra folding saw just for small limbs and things like that. And also, I can use this as a striker for a ferrocerium rod. It works really well for that. So I like to have an SAK. Do you have to have an SAK? No, you can have anything you wanted. This just works for me. So my Nessmuk trio for the 21st century would look like this. Okay, guys, well, once again, I apologize for the long-windedness, it's a little bit cold out today, of this video. I don't mean them to be long-winded. I like to get to the point and get it over with, but I also want you to understand the way I'm thinking through this process of creating this lightweight hunting, fishing, backpacking kit in the 21st century in the shadow of Nessmuk, using his mentality, his way of thinking, along with modern materials and modern mentality to put this together and kind of meld those two centuries, together as one. So I appreciate your views. I appreciate your support. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, and for our business, for all of our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends. And I'll be back with another video as soon as I can, guys. Thanks.